In 1847 Deadwood Gulch, 18-year-old Sarah McKinnon stood trembling as a saloon full of desperate men bid on her like cattle, until a mysterious stranger exploded through the door with enough force to shatter the hinges and change her fate forever. But when Deputy Marshal William Carver's rescue attempt attracts the deadly attention of the notorious outlaw Cimarron Jack, will one act of courage be enough to save them both from the violent reckoning that follows? The smell of cheap whiskey and unwashed bodies hit Sarah like a slap across the face. She pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of Murphy's saloon, trying to make herself as small as possible. The men around her were getting louder, meaner, and drunker by the minute. Outside, the wind howled through Deadwood Gulch like a wild animal, but inside felt far more dangerous. "Look at her shake," laughed a man missing half his teeth. "Like a scared rabbit." Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched her mother's silver locket. 3 days ago, she had been helping her father tend their small farm. 3 days ago, the fever hadn't taken him. 3 days ago, she hadn't discovered the terrible truth about the money he owed to very bad people. Murphy, the saloon owner, stood behind his bar like a king on his throne. His massive arms were covered in scars from countless fights. His eyes were cold as winter stones. When he looked at Sarah, she felt like a piece of meat hanging in a butcher shop window. "Gentlemen," Murphy called out, his voice booming over the noise, "we got ourselves a fine young lady here. Strong back, good with cooking and cleaning. Her daddy left some debts behind, and she's gonna work them off." Sarah wanted to scream that this wasn't fair. She wanted to run, but the door was blocked by men who looked at her like hungry wolves. The windows were too high and too small. She was trapped. A prospector with gold dust still clinging to his beard raised his hand. "I'll give you $15 for her. Got a claim up north that needs tending." "15?" scoffed another man, this one wearing a fancy vest that had seen better days. "I'll pay 20. My ranch needs help, and she looks strong enough for hard work." Sarah's stomach turned. They were talking about her like she was a horse at market. She thought about her mother, who had died when Sarah was 12. Her mother had been brave, always standing up for what was right. What would she do now? The bidding continued. $22, $25. Each number felt like a nail in Sarah's coffin. She watched the men's faces, trying to figure out which one might be the least terrible. The prospector looked mean, but maybe just wanted someone to cook his meals. The rancher kept licking his lips in a way that made her skin crawl. $28, shouted a man near the back. He was younger than the others, maybe 30 years old. His clothes were cleaner, and he didn't smell like he hadn't washed in months. But something in his eyes made Sarah more afraid than all the others combined. An old-timer sitting at a corner table had been quiet through all the shouting. Now he stood up slowly, his joints creaking like old leather. Sarah had noticed him earlier because he kept staring at her with sad eyes, like he was remembering something painful. "This ain't right," the old man said quietly. "What's that, Charlie?" Murphy asked, his voice carrying a warning. Charlie looked around the room, then back at Sarah. "I said this ain't right. Girl's barely grown, got her whole life ahead of her. Her daddy's debts don't care about her age," Murphy snapped. "You got money to bid? Or you just here to preach?" Charlie's shoulders sagged. Sarah could see he wanted to help but didn't have the money to make a difference. He sat back down, shaking his head. The young man with the clean clothes stepped forward. $30? he said, and his voice was smooth like snake oil. "I run a boarding house down in Silver Creek. She'd fit right in." Sarah didn't know much about the world, but she knew enough to understand what kind of boarding house he meant. Her face went white as fresh snow. "Now we're talking business," Murphy grinned, showing teeth stained brown from tobacco. $30 is real money." "32, called out the rancher, desperation in his voice. "35, the smooth-talking man countered without missing a beat. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. God felt very far away in this smoky, evil-smelling place. The locket around her neck grew warm from her racing heart. It was all she had left of her mother, the only thing of value she owned. Thunder rumbled outside, and the oil lamps flickered. The autumn storm was getting worse. Sarah could hear rain starting to hit the windows, mixed with the sound of men arguing over her future. $40, said a new voice from near the door. Sarah's eyes snapped open. A man she hadn't noticed before stood just inside the entrance. He was tall but not giant, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they knew honest work. His coat was black and travel-worn, and rain dripped from his hat brim. $40 is a lot of money, stranger, Murphy said, studying the newcomer carefully. You got that kind of cash? The man reached into his coat, and several of the other bidders tensed, but he only pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. I do. Well now, Murphy's grin got wider. Looks like we got ourselves a real auction. Sarah stared at the stranger. Unlike the others, he wasn't looking at her like she was something to be owned. His eyes held something different. Something that made her think, for just a moment, that maybe not all men were wolves. But who was he? And why was he here? Act 2. The stranger's boots made no sound as he stepped deeper into the saloon. Every eye in the room followed his movement, but his attention seemed focused on Murphy alone. Sarah noticed he walked differently than the other men, not swaggering or stumbling, but with the careful balance of someone always ready for trouble. Name's William, he said simply, setting his hat on the nearest table. Water still dripped from his dark hair. William Carver. Don't know you, Carver, Murphy replied, but Sarah caught something new in the big man's voice. Uncertainty, maybe even worry. You new to Deadwood? Passing through. William's eyes swept the room again, taking in every face, every detail. When his gaze landed on Sarah, she felt something strange, not the hungry stare she'd grown used to, but something protective. Heard there was some kind of business happening here tonight. The smooth-talking man from Silver Creek stepped forward, his clean vest buttoned tight. Business that's none of yours, friend. We're in the middle of a legal transaction. Legal? William raised one eyebrow. That's an interesting word choice. Sarah watched the exchange like a tennis match, her heart pounding. Something was happening here, something bigger than just another bid. The air in the saloon felt heavy, like right before lightning strikes. Old Charlie, still sitting at his corner table, leaned forward. His weathered face showed interest for the first time all evening. He'd lived through enough trouble to recognize when more was coming. You got business with the girl? Murphy asked William. His massive hands rested on the bar, but Sarah noticed they were positioned close to something hidden underneath, probably a shotgun. I got business with anyone who thinks they can buy and sell human beings, William said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several men shifted nervously. The prospector with the gold-dusted beard suddenly found his drink very interesting. Even the Silver Creek man took a small step backward. Murphy's face darkened like storm clouds. Now hold on there, stranger. Nobody's buying or selling anything. The girl's daddy owed money. She's working off debts, fair and square. $45, called out the rancher, trying to redirect attention back to the bidding. His voice cracked slightly. But William ignored him completely. Instead, he walked slowly toward Sarah. The crowd parted before him like water around a rock. Up close, she could see lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun and hard decisions made. There was something about him that reminded her of her father, not the gambling, weak man he'd become, but the strong, kind father she remembered from childhood. Miss, William said gently, what's your name? Sarah, she whispered. Sarah McKinnon. Sarah McKinnon, he repeated, as if trying to memorize it. That's a fine name. Your daddy was Thomas McKinnon, the farmer out east of town? She nodded, surprised he knew. I heard about his passing. I'm sorry for your loss. William's voice carried genuine sympathy. But I'm curious about something. Did your daddy ever sign any papers saying you were responsible for his debts? Sarah blinked. In all the chaos and grief of the past 3 days, nobody had asked her that question. I don't think so. I never signed anything. A murmur ran through the crowd. Murphy's face got redder. Doesn't matter what she signed. Her daddy's gone. She's all that's left. Debts passed down. Actually, William said, turning back to face the room, that's not how the law works. Not in this territory. Not anywhere civilized. The Silver Creek man laughed, but it sounded forced. Law? Out here? You're dreaming, friend. William reached into his coat again. This time, several men actually stepped toward their guns, but what he pulled out made them all freeze. A badge, silver and official, catching the lamplight. Deputy Marshal William Carver, he announced, his voice carrying new authority. Territorial jurisdiction. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Murphy's face went from red to pale in seconds. The smooth-talking man from Silver Creek looked like he'd swallowed a toad. Old Charlie started to chuckle, then burst into full laughter. Well, I'll be jiggered, he wheezed. A lawman. Should have seen that coming. Now wait just a minute, Murphy sputtered, but his bluster was gone. This is a private business matter. You got no right to interfere. I got every right to interfere when I see crimes being committed. William's hand rested casually near his gun belt. Coercion, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Should I go on? Sarah felt dizzy with relief and confusion. A marshal, an actual lawman, had walked into this nightmare. But why was he here? How had he known? The rancher backed toward the door. I think I'll be going now. Got an early day tomorrow. Me too, said the prospector, suddenly very interested in leaving. But the Silver Creek man held his ground. You're making a big mistake, Marshal. This girl's daddy owed money to some very dangerous people. You take her under your protection. You're signing both your death warrants. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. She'd heard whispers about her father's gambling. But dangerous people? How bad had things gotten? William studied the man carefully. What kind of dangerous people? The kind that don't forget debts. The kind that don't care about badges. The man's smooth voice carried real menace now. Cimarron Jack's men were through here yesterday, asking questions about Thomas McKinnon. They'll be back. Even William seemed to pause at that name. Cimarron Jack was notorious throughout the territories, a killer who collected debts with bullets and left ghost towns in his wake. But after a moment, William straightened his shoulders. Then I guess we'd better settle this quickly. He looked at Sarah with steady eyes. Miss McKinnon, I can't force you to come with me, but I can offer you safe passage to Denver, where my sister runs a boarding house for young ladies. A real boarding house, he added, glancing at the Silver Creek man. Sarah's mother's locket seemed to pulse against her chest. Her mother's voice whispered across the years, Trust your heart, child. It knows good from evil. But could she trust this stranger, even if he was a marshal? And what about Cimarron Jack? The stranger's boots hit the wooden floor like thunder. Every head in Murphy's saloon turned toward the sound. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the corner, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. The man stood in the doorway like a mountain made of shadow and steel. His long black coat dripped with road dust. His hat sat low over eyes that seemed to see everything at once. When he stepped forward, the floorboards groaned under his weight. This auction is over, he said. His voice cut through the smoky air like a knife through butter. Murphy laughed, but it sounded forced. Mister, I don't know who you think you are, but here's a legal business matter. The girl owes money, and we're collecting. The stranger took another step. Sarah could see his face now in the yellow lamplight. Deep lines around his eyes spoke of hard years under the sun. A scar ran from his left ear to his jaw. But something in his expression made her feel safer than she had in days. Legal? The stranger's eyebrows rose. Since when is selling people legal in Dakota Territory? A murmur ran through the crowd. Some men shifted in their chairs. Others reached for their drinks with shaking hands. Sarah noticed how the stranger's presence changed everything. The hungry looks on the men's faces turned to worry. "Now see here," said the fat man who'd been bidding loudest. His name was Silas, and he owned the general store. The girl's daddy owed money all over town. Someone's got to pay. And that someone has to be her? The stranger's coat fell open. Sarah saw something shine on his shirt, a silver star. "Seems to me there might be other ways to handle debts." Murphy's face turned red as a sunset. He was a big man, bigger than anyone else in the room. His arms looked like tree trunks. Scars covered his knuckles from years of fighting. But even he seemed smaller with the stranger there. "You're a lawman," Murphy said. It wasn't a question. "Deputy Marshal William Carver." The stranger touched the brim of his hat like he was greeting a lady at church. "And you are?" "Murphy. I own this place." "Nice establishment," Marshal Carver said, looking around. His eyes took in the dirty floor, the broken chairs, the faces of men who'd been drinking since morning. Very welcoming. Sarah almost smiled despite her fear. The marshal's words said one thing, but his tone said something else entirely. "Look, Marshal," Murphy tried again. "The girl's daddy died owing money. Lots of money. To lots of people. Some of them ain't as patient as others, if you catch my meaning." This caught the marshal's attention. His eyes sharpened. "What kind of people?" Silence fell over the saloon like a heavy blanket. Sarah saw men exchange glances. Someone coughed. Another man stood up and walked quickly toward the back door. "The kind you don't want to owe money to," Murphy said quietly. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd heard whispers about her father's gambling, but she'd thought it was just card games with neighbors. Now she realized it was much worse. "How much?" Marshal Carver asked. $80. The number hit Sarah like a punch. $80 was more money than most people saw in a year. How could her father have lost so much? "That's a lot of money for a farmer to owe," the marshal said. "Thomas McKinnon wasn't much of a farmer," Murphy replied. "But he sure loved his poker games." Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. Her father had always said he was working late in the fields. Now she knew where he'd really been. "So you decided to sell his daughter to pay his debts?" The marshal's voice grew cold as winter wind. "It was her idea," Murphy pointed at Sarah. "She said she'd do whatever it took to make things right." "I said I'd work," Sarah found her voice. "I said I'd work to pay off the debt. I never said you could sell me like a horse." The marshal turned to look at her. When their eyes met, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. Hope. "How old are you, miss?" he asked gently. 18, sir." "And you have no other family?" Sarah shook her head. "My mother died when I was 12. It's just been me and Papa since then." The marshal nodded. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather bag. Coins clinked inside it. $80, he said, setting the bag on the nearest table. "That covers the debt." Murphy's eyes widened. "You're just going to pay it? Just like that?" "Just like that." The marshal kept his hand on the bag. "Of course. This means the young lady is free to go. No more auctions, no more selling. Are we clear?" The men in the saloon looked at each other. Some nodded. Others frowned. Sarah could tell they weren't happy about losing their entertainment. But Silas stood up. His face was purple with anger. "Now wait just a minute. I bid $30 on her. Fair and square. You can't just come in here and—" The marshal's head turned toward Silas like a hawk spotting a mouse. "You bid $30 on a human being?" "Well, she needs work, and I need help in my store." "Then offer her a job. With wages. Like any other worker." Silas opened his mouth, then closed it again. He sat down hard in his chair. Sarah felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. For the first time in days, someone was treating her like a person instead of property. But Murphy wasn't finished. He leaned forward on the bar, his knuckles white. You don't understand, Marshal. The money she owes, it ain't just to townsfolk. Some of it's to people who don't take kindly to being stiffed. What people? The Marshal's voice was quiet, but something in it made the hair on Sarah's neck stand up. Murphy glanced around the room. Most of the men were staring at their drinks now. Nobody wanted to meet his eyes. Cimarron Jack's people, Murphy whispered. The name hit the room like lightning. Sarah gasped. Even she'd heard of Cimarron Jack. He was the kind of outlaw mothers used to scare children into behaving. Marshal Carver's expression didn't change, but his hand moved closer to his gun. How much does she owe to Jack? $20. But it ain't just about the money anymore. Jack don't like being disrespected. And not paying what you owe. That's disrespect in his book. Sarah felt the hope drain out of her like water from a broken bucket. Even if the Marshal paid her father's other debts, Cimarron Jack would still come looking for her. When is Jack expecting payment? The Marshal asked. Murphy checked the clock on the wall. His boys said they'd be back by sunset tomorrow. That gives us time, the Marshal said. Time for what? Sarah asked. The Marshal looked at her again. This time, his eyes held something that looked like determination. Time to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere safe? Silas jumped up again, his chair falling backward. Marshal, you got no idea what you're getting into. Cimarron Jack ain't some small-time cattle rustler. He's killed more men than the fever. Sarah watched the Marshal's face. He didn't look scared. He looked thoughtful, like he was working out a puzzle in his head. Tell me about Jack, he said to Murphy. How many men does he ride with? Usually 5 or 6, Murphy answered. All mean as rattlesnakes and twice as quick with their guns. And they're coming here tomorrow? That's what they said. The Marshal walked to the window and looked out at the dusty street. Sarah could see him thinking. His fingers drummed silently against his leg. There's something else, Murphy said quietly. Jack's got a personal interest in this debt. What kind of personal interest? The Marshal turned back from the window. Murphy's face went pale. Thomas McKinnon didn't just lose money to Jack. He cheated him in a card game up in Rapid City last month. The room went dead silent. Sarah felt like someone had poured ice water down her back. Cheating at cards was bad enough. Cheating Cimarron Jack was a death sentence. How do you know this? The Marshal asked. Because I was there, Murphy said. I saw Tom palm the ace. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. Said he needed the money too bad to quit. Sarah sank into the nearest chair. Her father hadn't just been unlucky. He'd been desperate enough to cheat one of the most dangerous men in the territory. No wonder Jack was coming after her. So this isn't really about money, the Marshal said. It's about reputation. Murphy nodded. Jack can't let word get out that someone cheated him and got away with it. Bad for business. Which means paying the debt won't be enough, the Marshal said. Not hardly. Jack's going to want blood, either Tom's or someone close to Tom. Sarah felt sick. She was someone close to Tom. She was all that was left. But the Marshal surprised her. Instead of looking worried, he almost smiled. Well then, he said, I guess we'll have to make sure Jack doesn't find her. You can't hide from Cimarron Jack, Silas said. He's got men all over the territory. They'll track her down no matter where she goes. Maybe, the Marshal said, but tracking takes time, and time is what we need. He turned to Sarah. Miss McKinnon, how do you feel about taking a long trip? A trip where? Sarah asked. Denver. I've got a sister there who runs a boarding house for young ladies. Good, respectable work. You'd be safe. Sarah's heart jumped. Denver was hundreds of miles away, far enough that maybe even Cimarron Jack couldn't reach her. But Murphy shook his head. Marshal, you're not thinking straight. Jack's got friends everywhere. Telegraph lines run to Denver, same as anywhere else. He'll have men waiting for her before she even gets there. Not if she doesn't take the regular route, the Marshal said. What do you mean? Sarah asked. The Marshal walked over to her. Up close, She could see kindness in his eyes. It reminded her of her father before the gambling took hold of him. "There's old Indian trails through the mountains," he said. "Paths that don't show up on any map. I know them from my scouting days. We could be in Denver before Jack even knows she's gone." "We?" Sarah blinked. "You don't think I'd send you alone, do you?" The marshal's voice was gentle. "I've got a daughter about your age. Her name's Emily. She's safe at home with her mother in Denver, but if she was ever in trouble like this—" He paused. "Well, I'd hope some stranger would help her too." Sarah felt tears in her eyes again, but these were different tears. Not tears of fear, but of gratitude. "You'd really do that?" she whispered. "For someone you don't even know?" "Miss, I've been a lawman for 15 years. I've seen what happens when good people don't help each other. It ain't pretty." Murphy slammed his hand on the bar. "This is crazy talk. You'll both end up dead. Jack's not going to just let this slide." "Maybe not," the marshal said, "but running's better than waiting here for him to show up." He turned to face the whole saloon. "I want everyone here to listen careful. When Jack's men come asking questions, you tell them the truth. Sarah McKinnon left town with a U.S. Marshal, but you don't know where we went or when we're coming back. Understood?" Some men nodded, others looked away. Sarah could tell they were scared of what Jack might do if he thought they were helping her escape. "What if he doesn't believe us?" asked Pete the blacksmith. "What if he thinks we're lying? Then you show him this." The marshal took a piece of paper from his pocket and wrote something on it. "Official U.S. Marshal business." That should make him think twice about causing trouble in a federal matter. He handed the paper to Murphy. "Post this on your door. Let everyone know this is government business now." Murphy read the paper and nodded slowly. "Might work. Jack's mean, but he ain't stupid. He knows better than to tangle with federal marshals if he can help it." "Good." The marshal turned back to Sarah. "We should leave tonight, soon as it's dark." "Tonight?" Sarah's stomach fluttered. Everything was happening so fast. "The sooner we go, the better our chances," the marshal said. "Jack's men might come early. We can't take that risk." Sarah looked around the saloon one more time. These people weren't her friends, but they were all she'd known since her father died. Leaving felt scary and exciting at the same time. "What should I bring?" she asked. "Just what you need. We'll be traveling light and fast." Sarah nodded. She didn't have much anyway. A few dresses, her mother's Bible, and the silver locket her grandmother had given her. Everything else could stay. "There's one more thing," the marshal said. "Once we leave, there's no coming back. Not for a long time. Maybe never. Are you sure this is what you want?" Sarah thought about her choices. Stay and face Cimarron Jack's revenge for her father's cheating, or trust this stranger and start a new life far away. When she put it like that, the choice was easy. "I'm sure," she said. The marshal smiled. "Good. Meet me behind the stable at midnight. Bring only what you can carry in a small bag." As Sarah headed for the door, she heard Murphy call out behind her. "Girl." She turned. "For what it's worth," Murphy said quietly, "I'm sorry about your pa. He was a good man who made bad choices. Don't let his mistakes define your life." Sarah nodded. She understood what he meant. Her father's debts were his responsibility, not hers, but sometimes life didn't care about what was fair. "Thank you," she said. Then she walked out into the afternoon sun, already planning for the journey that would change her life forever. Behind her, she could hear the men in the saloon talking in low voices. Some thought the marshal was crazy. Others thought he was brave. A few thought he was both. Sarah didn't care what they thought. For the first time since her father died, she had hope. And sometimes, hope was all you needed to take the first step toward a new life. The oil lamps flickered as Murphy's face turned red with anger. Sarah felt her heart beating so fast she thought everyone could hear it. The big man behind the bar looked like a bear ready to attack. "She ain't just any girl," Murphy said, his voice getting louder with each word. "Her daddy made a deal with the devil himself." William kept his hand near his gun. Sarah noticed how still he stood, like a cat watching a mouse. The other men in the saloon started moving toward the doors, but they moved slowly, like they didn't want to miss what happened next. "What kind of deal?" William asked. Murphy laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Tom McKinnon loved his card games more than his own daughter, lost everything he had, then kept playing with money he didn't have. Sarah's stomach felt sick. She remembered all those nights her father came home late, smelling like whiskey and fear. Now she knew why. "Who does he owe?" William's voice stayed calm, but Sarah saw his jaw get tight. "Cimarron Jack." The name hit the room like thunder. 2 more men rushed out the door. Sarah had heard stories about Cimarron Jack around campfires. He was the kind of man who killed people just to watch them die. William's face didn't change, but Sarah saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear? No, something else. Determination. "How much?" William asked. $80, Murphy said, plus interest, plus pain for making Jack wait. Sarah's legs felt weak. $80 was more money than most people saw in a year. Her father had gambled away her entire future. "When's Jack coming?" William asked. Murphy smiled like a wolf. "His boys rode through yesterday asking questions. They'll be back tomorrow morning, maybe tonight if they're feeling eager." Sarah stepped forward. "I can work. I can pay it back over time." "I'm sorry to interrupt you right here, but if you're enjoying this story thus far, please consider to subscribe to our channel so that you can enjoy so many more in the future. And by the way, don't hesitate to like the video as well, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now enjoy the rest of the story. Murphy laughed so hard his belly shook. "Girl, you don't understand. Jack don't take payments. He takes what he wants when he wants it. And what he wants is you." The words hit Sarah like cold water. She understood now why the men had been bidding on her. They thought they were saving her from something worse. William moved closer to Murphy. "There's got to be another way." "Only way is to give Jack what he wants," Murphy said, "or run so far he can't find you. But Jack's got men everywhere. He's got more reach than the territorial government." Sarah felt tears starting in her eyes, but she pushed them back. Crying wouldn't help anything now. "How long before his men get here?" William asked. Murphy looked out the window at the setting sun. "If they ride hard, maybe 3 hours. If they take their time, maybe morning." William turned to Sarah. "Miss, I know this is scary, but I need you to trust me." Sarah looked into his eyes. They were kind eyes, like her father's used to be before the gambling took over his life. "What do you want me to do?" "We need to leave, right now." Murphy slammed his hand on the bar. "You take that girl out of here. You're signing both your death papers. Jack don't forgive, and he don't forget." "Then we better make sure he can't find us," William said. Sarah felt something change inside her chest. The fear was still there, but something else was growing too. Hope, maybe, or just the feeling that someone finally cared what happened to her. "My horse is outside," William said. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Sarah said. "My father taught me before." She stopped. "Before he started gambling away their horses along with everything else." William nodded like he understood. "Good. We'll take the mountain trail. It's harder to track in the rocks." Murphy shook his head. "You're both fools. Jack's killed men for less than this." "Maybe," William said, "but some things are worth the risk." Sarah ran to the corner where she'd been hiding and grabbed her small bag. Everything she owned in the world fit in one canvas sack: her mother's Bible, 2 dresses, and the silver locket. As they headed for the door, Murphy called out one more time, "Deputy, you seem like a decent man. Don't throw your life away for a stranger." William stopped and turned around. "She's not a stranger anymore." Outside, the night air felt clean after the smoky saloon. William's horse was big and black, with intelligent eyes that reminded Sarah of the deputy himself. "What's his name?" Sarah asked, trying to calm her nerves. "Thunder," William said, checking the saddle straps. "He's carried me through worse than this." Sarah hoped that was true. As William helped her up behind him, she heard the sound of horses in the distance. Her blood turned cold. Is that them? She whispered. William listened for a moment, then shook his head. Just travelers. But we need to go. As Thunder started moving, Sarah looked back at the saloon one last time. Light spilled from the windows onto the dusty street. In a few hours, dangerous men would come looking for her there. But she wouldn't be there anymore. Thunder's hooves hit the ground like drum beats as they raced away from town. Sarah held tight to William's coat, feeling the powerful horse underneath them eating up the miles. The moon was full and bright, turning the world silver and black. How far to the mountains? Sarah called over the wind. 5 miles, William called back. Maybe 6. Behind them, Sarah could see the lights of Deadwood Gulch getting smaller. Soon they were just tiny dots, like stars that had fallen to earth. Thunder was breathing hard but still running strong. Sarah could feel the horse's muscles working beneath her. This was a horse that had run many miles before. He's beautiful, Sarah said. Best horse I ever owned, William replied. Saved my life more times than I can count. The trail started going uphill. Sarah could smell pine trees and mountain air. It was so different from the stale air of the saloon that she almost felt like crying with relief. Tell me about your daughter, Sarah said. She wanted to know more about the man who had risked everything to help her. Emily's 17, William said. Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn. She wants to be a teacher. Where is she now? Back east with my sister, getting a proper education. William's voice got softer. Her mother died when she was small. Fever took her, just like it took your father. Sarah felt a connection to this man she barely knew. They had both lost people they loved. They both knew how it felt to be alone. Is that why you helped me? Sarah asked. Partly, William said, but mostly because it was the right thing to do. Thunder stumbled slightly on a loose rock, then found his footing again. The trail was getting steeper and more dangerous. We need to rest him soon, William said. Push him too hard and he'll go lame. They found a small clearing next to a creek. William helped Sarah down, then led Thunder to the water. The horse drank deeply while William checked his legs for cuts or swelling. He's fine, William said, just tired. Sarah knelt by the creek and splashed cold water on her face. It felt wonderful after the heat and dust of their escape. How long before they catch up? She asked. William looked back down the trail. Depends how many men Jack sent. If it's just 2 or 3, we might stay ahead of them. If he sent more, he didn't finish the sentence. Sarah understood. More men meant they could spread out, cut off escape routes, surround them. What about the law? Sarah asked. Can't we get help from other lawmen? William shook his head. Nearest marshal is 3 days' ride. Jack's men will find us long before then. Sarah felt her hopes starting to fade. So we just keep running? We run until we can't run anymore, William said. Then we make a stand. Thunder lifted his head from the creek, ears forward and alert. William noticed immediately. What is it, boy? William whispered. Then Sarah heard it too. The sound of horses moving fast, still far away but getting closer. How many? Sarah whispered. William listened carefully. At least 4, maybe more. Sarah's heart started beating fast again. 4 men was bad. More than 4 was worse. Can we outrun them? She asked. William looked at Thunder, then at the steep trail ahead. Not on this horse. Not carrying double. He's strong, but he's not magic. Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. Then leave me here. You can get away if you're riding alone. William stared at her like she'd grown a second head. I'm not leaving you. But if you stay, we'll both get caught. Then we'll both get caught together. The sound of horses was getting louder. Sarah could hear voices now, rough men calling to each other in the darkness. William helped her back onto Thunder. There's a place up ahead where the trail splits. We'll take the harder path. Maybe they won't expect that. They climbed higher into the mountains. The air got thinner and colder. Sarah's dress wasn't warm enough for the mountain night, and she started shivering. Without saying anything, William shrugged out of his coat and handed it back to her. It was still warm from his body and smelled like leather and honest work. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't mention it." The trail split just like William had said. The easier path went around the mountain. The harder one went straight up, over rocks and loose stones that could make a horse fall. William chose the hard path. Thunder climbed carefully, picking his way between the rocks. One wrong step would send them all tumbling down the mountainside. Behind them, the voices were getting closer. Sarah could hear individual words now. "Trail goes both ways," one man called. "Split up," another voice answered. 2 men on each path. Sarah's stomach dropped. They were going to be followed no matter which way they went. But then something unexpected happened. The voices started arguing. "I ain't taking my horse up that death trap," one man said. "Jack said to bring her back alive," another voice replied. "Can't do that if we're all dead at the bottom of a cliff." "Then we wait here," the first voice said. "They got to come down sometime." Sarah felt a tiny spark of hope. The men were scared of the mountain trail. Maybe William's plan would work after all. They climbed higher into the darkness, leaving the voices far below. But Sarah knew they weren't safe yet. Morning would come soon, and with it, new dangers she couldn't even imagine. The sound of gunfire split the morning air like thunder. William dove behind a boulder, pulling Sarah down just as a bullet chipped the rock where her head had been. Dust and stone fragments rained down on them both. "Stay low!" William shouted over the noise. His hat had fallen off, and sweat dripped down his face. "They're closer than I thought." Sarah pressed herself against the cold stone. Her heart beat so fast she could hear it in her ears. The spare gun William had given her felt heavy and strange in her small hands. She had told him the truth about her father teaching her to shoot, but that was years ago. Back then, they were hunting rabbits for dinner. Today, men were hunting them. "How many?" she whispered. William peeked around the edge of their hiding spot. Another shot rang out, and he pulled back quickly. 5 riders, maybe 6. Hard to tell with all that dust they're kicking up. The canyon walls rose high around them like the sides of a giant bowl. Red rocks and twisted trees created shadows everywhere. It was a good place to hide, but also a good place to get trapped. William had chosen this spot because the narrow paths would slow down the horses, but now Sarah wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. A voice echoed off the canyon walls. It was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Deputy Carver, we know you're in there." William's jaw tightened. He checked his rifle and counted the bullets in his belt. Sarah noticed his hands were steady, even though danger surrounded them. She wished she felt half as brave as he looked. "That's Cimarron Jack himself," William said quietly. "I recognize his voice from the wanted posters. He's got a scar across his left cheek from a knife fight in Kansas." Sarah shivered. Everyone in the territory had heard stories about Cimarron Jack. He was the kind of man mothers used to scare children into behaving, the kind who left no witnesses behind. "What does he want with me?" she asked. "I'm nobody special." "Your father owed him money, a lot of money, from what I heard back in town." William reloaded his rifle with quick, practiced movements. "Jack doesn't like it when people don't pay what they owe." The sound of horses moving grew louder. They were coming closer, step by careful step. Sarah could hear leather saddles creaking and metal spurs jingling. Her mouth felt dry as old paper. "Deputy," Jack's voice came again, closer now. "No need for anyone to get hurt today. Just send out the girl and we'll call it even." William's eyes met Sarah's. In them, she saw something that made her feel a little braver. He would fight for her, maybe even die for her. This stranger who owed her nothing was willing to risk everything. "Not happening, Jack," William called back. "Find yourself another way to settle old debts." A different voice answered this time. Younger, angrier. "Then you'll both die in that hole." "That's Tom Fletcher, Jack's nephew," William told Sarah. "Hot-headed kid. Dangerous because he's stupid." Sarah looked at the gun in her hands. It was a Colt revolver, the kind her father had taught her to use when she was 12. She remembered his lessons. Keep both eyes open, squeeze the trigger slowly, breathe out before you shoot. But shooting at tin cans was nothing like this. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, William said. Scared people pay attention. Brave fools get themselves killed. A rock skittered down from above them. Someone was climbing the canyon wall, trying to get behind them. William spun around and fired upward. A man cried out and tumbled down, his rifle clattering on the stones. That's one less, William said, but his face looked grim. They'll try that again. Sarah watched the rim of the canyon. Shadows moved between the rocks. How many men were up there? How long could they hold out? Her throat felt tight with fear. My father, she said suddenly. How much money did he owe? William glanced at her. Does it matter now? I need to know. $80. Maybe $100. It was gambling debts, mostly cards. Sarah's heart sank. $80 was more money than she had ever seen in one place. It might as well have been $800 or $8,000. There was no way she could ever pay it back. That's why Murphy was selling me, she said. It wasn't a question. Men like Murphy see dollar signs instead of human beings, William replied. Don't waste time thinking about him. More voices echoed around them now. Jack's men were spreading out, surrounding the canyon. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's face. What would her mother do in a situation like this? The answer came to her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her mother would find a way to make things right, not through fighting or running, but through courage of a different kind. William, she said softly, I think I know what to do. But before she could explain, the sound of hoofbeats thundered closer, and Cimarron Jack's voice boomed across the canyon one more time. Last chance, deputy. Send her out, or we're coming in. Sarah stood up before William could stop her. Her legs shook like leaves in a strong wind, but she walked out from behind the boulder anyway. The morning sun felt warm on her face as she stepped into the open space between the rocks. Sarah, no, William shouted behind her. Get back here. But she kept walking. Her mother's silver locket bounced against her chest with each step. The men on horseback stared down at her like wolves watching a rabbit. Their faces were hard and mean, covered with dust from the long ride. Cimarron Jack sat on a big black horse in the middle of the group. The scar on his left cheek looked like a lightning bolt frozen in place. His eyes were the color of winter storms. When he smiled, Sarah saw that one of his front teeth was missing. Well, well, Jack said, his voice carrying easily across the canyon. Look what we have here. Little Sarah McKinnon, all grown up. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to speak. You knew my father. I knew him real well. He owed me money. A lot of money. Jack leaned forward in his saddle. Your daddy was good at making promises, not so good at keeping them. Behind her, Sarah heard William moving. She knew he was getting ready to fight if things went bad. The thought of this good man dying because of her father's mistakes made her stomach twist. How much? She asked. Jack laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. $93.50 to be exact, plus interest for being late. Call it an even 100. The number hit Sarah like a punch to the chest. $100 was more than most people made in a year. Her father had been a store clerk. How had he gotten into debt for so much money? I don't have that kind of money, she said. No, but you got something else. Jack's eyes moved up and down, looking at her like she was a horse he might buy. Pretty young thing like you could work off that debt real quick. Sarah felt sick. She knew what kind of work he meant. It was the same thing Murphy had planned back at the saloon. Men like Jack and Murphy saw women as things to be bought and sold and used up. There's another way, she said, reaching for the locket at her throat. William stepped out from behind the rocks. His rifle was pointed at Jack's chest. Nobody's working off anything, he said. This girl is under my protection. Deputy Marshal William Carver, Jack said. like he was tasting the name. I heard about you. They say you're an honest lawman. That's rare these days. Honest enough to put you in jail where you belong. Jack's men shifted in their saddles. Hands moved toward guns. The air felt thick and dangerous, like the moment before lightning strikes. Now, that would be a trick, Jack said, seeing as how you're outnumbered 5-1. Sarah opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside was a tiny picture of her mother, painted on ivory. Her mother had been beautiful, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Next to the picture was a small piece of paper with her mother's wedding ring wrapped inside. This belonged to my mother, Sarah said, holding up the locket so Jack could see it. It's real silver. The ring is gold. Together, they're worth more than my father's debt. Jack's eyes fixed on the jewelry. Sarah could see him thinking, weighing the value in his mind. Silver and gold were always worth something, even in the middle of nowhere. That's a pretty trinket, Jack said slowly. But how do I know it's worth what you say? Sarah unwrapped the ring and held it up to catch the sunlight. The gold gleamed bright and warm. This ring has been in my family for 3 generations. My great-grandmother brought it from Ireland. The locket was made by a jeweler in St. Louis. She was making up the part about Ireland and St. Louis, but it sounded good. Sometimes a good story was worth as much as the truth. Jack nudged his horse closer. Let me see it. Sarah placed the locket and ring on a flat rock between them. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped them. These were the last things she had left of her mother. Without them, she would have nothing to remember her by except memories. But some things were more important than keeping treasures. Jack climbed down from his horse and walked over to the rock. He picked up the jewelry and examined it carefully. The other men watched him, waiting to see what he would decide. Real silver, Jack said after a moment. Real gold, too. This ring's got some weight to it. He looked up at Sarah with something that might have been respect. You got more backbone than your daddy ever did, girl. Sarah felt tears starting in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Is it enough? Jack weighed the jewelry in his palm. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Finally, he nodded. It's enough. Debt's paid. He slipped the locket and ring into his jacket pocket. But let me give you some free advice, little girl. Get far away from here. Some of my boys ain't as understanding as I am. They might decide you still owe them something for the trouble. Relief flooded through Sarah like cool water. She had done it. She had found a way to save both herself and William without anyone getting killed. But as Jack turned to go, Sarah realized something had changed inside her. She wasn't the same scared girl who had cowered in Murphy's saloon. Somewhere between then and now, she had found a strength she never knew she had. Thank you, she called after Jack. He stopped and looked back at her. For what? For giving me the chance to choose. Jack studied her for a long moment. Then he touched the brim of his hat like a gentleman tipping his cap to a lady. You chose well, he said. And then he and his men rode away, leaving Sarah and William alone in the canyon with the rising sun and the promise of a new beginning. Sarah's hand shook as she held the telegram 3 days after arriving in Denver. The paper felt heavy, like it carried bad news from another world. Margaret Carver, William's sister, stood beside her in the boarding house kitchen, flour dusting her apron from the morning's bread making. What does it say, dear? Margaret asked, her voice gentle but worried. Cimarron Jack is dead, Sarah whispered, reading the words again. Shot down in a gunfight in Cheyenne. But his brother Tom is asking questions about the girl who gave Jack their mother's silver locket. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Sarah could smell bacon frying, coffee brewing, and the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls. Normal smells, safe smells. But now danger was creeping back into her new world, like smoke under a door. Margaret set down her rolling pin with a sharp click. William mentioned you might have trouble from that family. We need to think about this carefully. Through the window, Sarah watched Denver's busy streets. Wagons rolled past, carrying supplies to the mountains. Children played hopscotch on the wooden sidewalks. Ladies in fancy dresses walked arm in arm, laughing about something Sarah couldn't hear. This was the life she wanted, peaceful and normal. "I won't run any more," Sarah said, surprising herself with how strong her voice sounded. "I'm tired of being scared." Margaret studied her with sharp blue eyes, the same color as William's. "Running isn't always cowardice, child. Sometimes it's the smartest thing you can do." "But I have a job now. Mr. Patterson at the governor's office says I'm the best clerk he's ever hired. I can read and write better than most men. I can do math in my head faster than they can on paper. Why should I give that up because some outlaw wants revenge?" The older woman smiled, but worry lines creased her forehead. "Because being alive is more important than being brave." Sarah folded the telegram and put it in her pocket. The paper crinkled like dry leaves. "My mother used to say that life without courage isn't really living at all." A knock at the front door interrupted them. Margaret frowned. "We're not expecting anyone this early." Sarah's heart jumped. Through the lace curtains, she could see a tall figure on the porch. For a moment, she thought it might be Tom Jack. Then the man turned, and sunlight caught the silver badge on his chest. "It's Deputy Marshal Harrison," Margaret said, relief clear in her voice. "William must have sent him to check on us." But when Margaret opened the door, the deputy's face was grim. "Ladies, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. We've received word that Tom Jack and 3 of his men were seen in Colorado Springs yesterday. They're heading this way." Sarah's new world suddenly felt fragile, like a soap bubble ready to burst. She had built something here in just 3 weeks. Friendships with the other girls at the boarding house, respect from her boss. A future that looked bright and clean. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Maybe 2 days if they stop to ask questions. Less if they ride straight through." Margaret began pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "We could send her to my cousin in San Francisco. She has connections there. Good people who would help." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I've been thinking about this wrong. I keep waiting for other people to save me, or for problems to go away by themselves. But that's not how life works." She walked to the window and looked out at the street again. A group of men were loading supplies onto a wagon. They looked strong and capable, like they could handle any problem that came their way. "What are you thinking?" Deputy Harrison asked. "I'm thinking about something Mr. Patterson told me yesterday. He said the territorial government is always looking for good people to help with difficult situations. People who understand how outlaws think and operate." Margaret stopped pacing. "You want to help catch Tom Jack?" "I want to stop running from my past and start using it to build my future. I know things about Cimarron Jack's gang that might help. I know how they think, what they want, how they operate." Deputy Harrison raised his eyebrows. "That's dangerous thinking for a young lady." "Being a young lady has been dangerous from the moment my father died," Sarah replied. "At least this way, I'm choosing my own danger instead of having it choose me." She pulled the telegram from her pocket and read it one more time. Then she walked to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, turning into smoke that rose up the chimney and disappeared into the Colorado sky. "Send word to Mr. Patterson," she told the deputy. "Tell him his new clerk has information about Tom Jack that might interest the territorial government, and tell him I'm ready to earn my keep in a whole new way." Margaret shook her head. "Child, you're talking about putting yourself in harm's way on purpose." Sarah thought about the saloon, about William kicking down that door, about the moment she chose to give up her mother's locket to save them all. Each time, courage had felt like jumping off a cliff. But each time, she had learned to fly a little bit before hitting the ground. "I've been in harm's way since the day I was born a woman in this territory," she said. "The difference is, now I'm choosing to fight back." The morning sun painted the Colorado mountains gold as Sarah adjusted the badge on her vest. 6 months had passed since that conversation in Margaret's kitchen, and now she wore the silver star of a territorial investigator. Her first assignment had been to help catch Tom Jack, and she had done it by thinking like the prey instead of the hunter. "Remember," Deputy Marshal Harrison said as they approached the small mining camp where Tom Jack was hiding, "you're not Sarah McKinnon today. You're Sally Martin, a girl running from the law in Kansas." Sarah nodded, checking the small pistol hidden in her boot. She had practiced with it every day for months, until she could hit a playing card at 20 paces. Margaret had worried, but William had been proud when he visited last month. "I still think this plan is too dangerous," Harrison muttered. "Dangerous plans are the only ones that work against dangerous men," Sarah replied. The mining camp looked rough and temporary, like someone had thrown a handful of buildings against the mountainside and hoped they would stick. Miners walked between the wooden structures carrying pickaxes and shovels. The air smelled of dust and sweat and the promise of gold. Sarah walked into the saloon alone, her heart steady despite the memories of another saloon 6 months ago. This time was different. This time, she was the hunter. Tom Jack sat at a corner table playing cards with 2 other men. He looked like his brother, but meaner, with scars on his hands and a permanent sneer on his face. When Sarah approached his table, he looked up with the same hungry expression she remembered from Murphy's saloon. "Well, well," Tom said, setting down his cards. "What do we have here?" "Someone who needs help," Sarah said, making her voice shake just a little. "I heard you might be willing to help a girl in trouble." Tom's eyes narrowed. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that involves a dead sheriff and a saddlebag full of money that doesn't belong to me." The other men at the table exchanged glances. This was the language they understood: crime and money and desperation. "Sit down," Tom said, kicking out a chair. "Tell me more about this money." For the next hour, Sarah spun a tale about robbing a bank in Kansas and killing a sheriff who tried to stop her. She made up details about hiding the money in a cave near Denver and needing protection while she retrieved it. Tom Jack listened with growing interest. "Why should I trust you?" he asked finally. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a silver locket, not her mother's, but one that looked similar. "This belonged to the sheriff's wife. I took it after I shot him." Tom Jack's face changed when he saw the locket. His eyes grew wide, then angry, then confused. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "I told you, from the sheriff's wife inn." "This is my mother's locket," Tom said, his voice deadly quiet. "My brother gave it to some girl before he died. How did you really get it?" Sarah's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "Maybe your brother and I had more in common than you think." Tom Jack stood up so fast his chair fell backwards. "You're her. You're the girl from Deadwood Gulch." "Yes," Sarah said, standing as well. "And you've just confessed to planning a robbery in front of 3 witnesses." The other men looked confused until they saw the badges on Harrison and 2 other deputies who had been sitting at nearby tables. The whole saloon erupted in motion as Tom Jack reached for his gun. But Sarah was faster. Her pistol was in her hand before Tom's cleared his holster. The months of practice had paid off. "Don't," she said quietly. "I've already killed 1 man this year. I don't want to kill another." Tom Jack froze, his gun half drawn. Around the saloon, other patrons had scattered or hit the floor. The only sounds were breathing and the ticking of a clock behind the bar. "You're not a killer," Tom said, but his voice shook. "6 months ago, you would have been right," Sarah replied. "But people change when they stop being victims and start being something else." Harrison and the other deputies moved in, surrounding Tom Jack and his men. As they put the handcuffs on, Tom looked at Sarah with something that might have been respect. "My brother said you had steel in you," he said. Guess he was right. Later that evening, Sarah sat on Margaret's front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. She had sent a telegram to William, telling him about the successful arrest. Her badge felt heavy in her pocket, but it was a good weight, the weight of purpose and accomplishment. Margaret brought her a cup of coffee and sat in the rocking chair beside her. "So what's next for our famous lady investigator?" Sarah smiled, thinking about the letter in her other pocket. an offer to join a special unit that worked throughout the Western Territories, helping women and children in dangerous situations. "I think I'm going to keep kicking down doors," she said, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Turns out I'm pretty good at it." The silver locket was gone, but Sarah had found something better, a life built not on what others thought she was worth, but on what she had decided she was capable of becoming. And that, she thought, as the evening breeze carried the scent of pine trees and possibilities, was worth more than all the silver in the world.